By the end of the 2010s, Apple MacBooks had one main problem. Their aluminium bodies were so small they didn't have enough cooling inside for the ever hotter laptop processors Intel had been producing. The 2018 and 19 MacBook Pros had 8 Core i9 options with up to 5 GHz clock speeds. As a result, their cooling fans were near constantly running, and the logic boards would often develop fatal issues due to the added heat. But we all know Apple, and they weren't going to admit they were wrong for making such thin laptops. Instead of putting new Intel chips into thicker devices like they had in the past, Apple opted to design their own processors, which became known as Apple Silicon chips. Deciding to drop Intel altogether, who were by far the biggest CPU makers out there, was an incredibly bold gamble. Fast forward a few years though, and it's turned out to be one of the best financial decisions Apple have ever made, leading to the creation of some fantastic computers. Among them is probably Apple's greatest ever laptop, the 2020 M1 MacBook Pro. Released in November 2020, the M1 MacBook Pro uses the exact same body the 2019 Intel models used, and is of course powered by Apple's M1 chip. M1 has 8 CPU cores, 4 lower clocked efficiency ones, and 4 performance cores running at the maximum 3.2 GHz. 3.2 GHz doesn't sound like a lot compared to the 5 GHz chips found inside Intel-based MacBooks that came before it, but benchmarks and real-life tests show us just how far ahead the M1 chip was. Here are the Intel-based Mac's results on Geekbench 6's single-core CPU test, and here are the Apple Silicon ones, starting with M1 at the bottom. It's an insane 40% jump in performance year on year, and we might never see that kind of a jump again. As well as being fast, the M1 chip doesn't use up a lot of power. It idles around 6 watts and only consumes around 40 watts at peak while under load. Lower power computers are better at keeping cool, and Apple had so much confidence in their low power chip, they didn't even put a cooling fan inside the M1 MacBook Air, which was also released in 2020. That computer is an incredible performer for the price, as it was introduced at just under $1,000 or UK pounds. The lack of fan though does mean that under sustained load, the M1 chip does start to throttle, losing performance if you're doing something like rendering a video in Final Cut Pro. So that's another thing that makes this MacBook Pro special. Having a cooling fan unlocks the full potential of the M1 chip, and it means it could last a lot longer than the similar M1 Air. Over time, macOS is going to be a lot more demanding to run, and a fan will keep the chip inside from throttling and slowing down when you really need it. The fan very rarely spins up on this MacBook, but it's nice to know that the part is there if necessary, and you can customize the speed it runs at with an app called Max Fan Control. In the mid-2000s, Apple switched from using PowerPC processors to using Intel ones. Some of the very first Intel-based Macs, 2007 MacBook Pros, were subsequently supported on the latest versions of macOS for over 9 years. That's the longest run of support Apple has ever given to a MacBook. The M1 MacBooks are the first of their kind thanks to the Apple Silicon chips inside them, and I'm willing to bet they'll receive a pretty long lifespan of macOS updates too. The M1 MacBook Pro launched running 2020's macOS Big Sur by default. Since then, it's had every new release of macOS, and is soon going to get the new Tahoe update scheduled for late 2025. So that's 5 years so far, and it is almost certain Apple will support M1 Macs for a 6th year on macOS 27, as not all Intel-based Macs have even been dropped as of the making of this video. Remember, the M1 MacBook Air was sold new by Apple until the beginning of 2024, so a lot of people would be justifiably outraged if Apple were to discontinue support too soon. Time will tell when it comes to OS support, but as I say, the run has been a good one so far. The 2020 MacBook Pro was the last MacBook Apple ever made with a touch bar. The touch bar felt like a real game-changing, innovative feature when it came out in 2016. I mean, it literally puts a second screen on your laptop, and it is very customizable. It seems more like a gimmick now though, since there's not much touch bar Macs can do that ones with traditional function keys cannot. Unless you want a virtual pet underneath your screen, that is, and don't get me wrong, a lot of us do. The touch bar became a pretty divisive feature on MacBooks over the years. Some people have always sworn by it, while others suggested it was really stupid because it took away traditional function keys, which are really important for some people. The M1 MacBook Pro is equipped with 8 or 16GB of RAM. 8GB doesn't seem like enough to be getting on with on a professional grade laptop these days, but if you haven't used one of these M1 MacBooks, you'd be incredibly impressed with how the base model does manage. It's very capable of doing tasks like music production and video editing all the way up to 4K. I've got the high-end 16GB model here, and it's safe to say you should aim for one of these if you're after something to edit in 4K with, or if you'd like to play games on it. Whichever you go for, it's impressive to see such great performance 5 years after release on an 8GB machine. And the 16GB model is that extra bit better, so it doesn't disappoint either. I'm amazed I got this far through the video without talking about battery life. The M1 MacBook Pro is able to last over 20 hours on one battery charge. Some people who don't use their laptops often might find a single charge per week enough to keep this thing going for them. Really, it's a level of battery life never seen before on laptops until 2020. Tom's Guide did a review of it when it came out, and their tests gave this MacBook Pro 16.5 hours of mixed use on one charge. The previous year's Intel MacBook lasted 10 hours and 20 minutes, so again, a real jump ahead for the M1 chip. It all goes back to that power efficiency I talked about earlier. This laptop really only sips about 40 watts of power even at maximum sustained periods of load. So this MacBook is built into the same body the Intel Macs before it used. Like I said in my MacBook Air video, the display, trackpad, keyboard and body size on 2020 MacBooks are all top tier. There's no notch like on the newer machines as well. There are small things that make this Pro even better than the Air though. Firstly, the screen is 20% brighter, going up to 500 nits, which is great for bright rooms or if you want to use it outside. And there's a better microphone on the Pro as well. Apple calls it studio grade, and I'm inclined to agree. It's mind-blowing how good MacBook mics are already, but this one might just end up replacing my current audio interface entirely. To prove to you guys that it's studio grade, I've recorded this entire video's voiceover using the microphone on this laptop. The little differences do mean a lot these days. I've been using a base model M1 Air for the last year and a half now to record and to edit my videos. This laptop has enough little improvements over the Air that it's making me want to use it daily though. There's a couple more hours of battery life, the decently brighter display, and of course the studio grade mics. So that's the M1 MacBook Pro, a laptop which is now going on 5 years old. To most of us who own one though, it might as well still be a new computer, as the rest of the world is still struggling to catch up. Thank you very much for watching. If you're interested in supporting the channel financially, there's a link to my Patreon page in the description. There's also a link to the Discord server, which is a good place to talk about Macs, old and new. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you next week.